Welcome back to another album Yapcast. This week we are going to talk about our Mount Rushmore of horror scores. Let's get right into it. All right. We'll just go down the line with our first one, I guess, in no particular order. I have Nightmare on Elm Street.
My first one, I had The Thing.
First one that came to mind for me was The Shining.
Nightmare on Elm Street has always been one of my favorite horror franchises, and the second this video got brought up, I instantly thought of how iconic the synths are in that movie. And I mean, obviously you've got The Thing, and then anything John Carpenter is synth heavy. But I've always been a much bigger fan of Wes Craven, and then, you know, to go on to like later stuff he did with Scream and stuff, I've always thought he had phenomenal soundtracks, but Nightmare on Elm Street was pretty much just the perfect storm of good movie, good soundtrack.
That's pretty much exactly what went through my head with The Thing. Mostly the synths. There's a lot of synths on my list, but I just bought the soundtrack for The Thing.
Nice. For The Shining, for me, it was like, it's just the exposition at the beginning of the movie. I'm assuming no spoilers at this point, but kind of when they're driving up and the whole scene is you're kind of driving through this wooded scene. And if you don't know what the movie's about, the music is only kind of creepy. It's not like right in your face, but there's a lot of tension building, and I don't know. That movie scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, so I think that's part of it.
Yeah, just to touch on music, I guess, a little bit in horror movies is almost the most important part of a horror movie. Mm-hmm. We were talking a little prior to shooting this just about how older films don't really have much music because of how hard it was to pull it off to the speakers in theaters at the time, or the mics they had, and just the overall being able to edit a film that way and how hard it was. And so horror wasn't really a breakout genre until I would argue the 80s. I mean, you have horror movies from the 30s and up, but it really didn't get its stride until they were able to do all this crazy stuff with music and like all the synths and stuff that started in the 80s. I mean, in all reality, it's like 75 and up is when they kind of swung.
You see that in a lot of forms of art, really. Knowing a lot more about music, a lot of things that are considered very much like avant-garde, when the technology becomes available to just make it more, what's the right word? I lost the word. The ability to make it more consumable. What's the word I'm looking for?
Palatable?
Palatable is not really the right word, but just accessible.
Okay.
Just the way you can make that accessible. Because really, we were talking about like audio systems and stuff. Because I know a lot about the history of music tech, and literally, there's just no way up until a certain point that you would be able to do the things that good horror movies do and have separate voices in them, because they occupy the same frequencies. We talk about like how different surround sound is, and hearing stuff around you, and just being immersed in the audio, and how much that changes everything. Funny fact, I watch ghost shows all the time, and if you ever watch one on mute, you realize how not scary they are.
Oh, that's any horror movie. It's hilarious how many movies I watched as a child and was just terrified of. The biggest one was The Exorcist. That movie terrified me as a kid. And then one day, just in my adultedness, was like, all right, we're going to watch it again and try and figure out what it was that mystified me as a kid. And then I got to just like one of the Reagan scenes that specifically messed with me as a kid. And I was like, what is it about this? And I just put the TV on mute and was laughing because of how funny the effects look, how unserious it all was. But it was just the music and then the sound design of it itself. Which usually with scores in horror movies, they tend to get the two baked together. At least ones that do it well. You'll hear grass and root sounds in the score itself, as opposed to just the scene.
It's any little tricks they can do to make it feel more real. Mm-hmm. They mix in sounds with sounds you don't. That's just kind of the thing. They can. I forget. I was watching something on how they did the dinosaur sounds for Jurassic Park, because they had absolutely no idea what the dinosaurs actually sounded like. it's a combination of sounds and sounds you don't, and different tuning and all of that. Sound design's actually really cool if you ever get into it.
I guess we'll move on to our second horror movie. I picked It Follows.
Second one we've already kind of started talking about, but The Exorcist.
I picked Psycho for my second one.
It Follows came out in 2014. It's a very small budget indie film. That it is not a small film. It was a small budget indie film that it got huge. And I remember when this video got pitched, like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
We started deliberations then, and it didn't super kick in until like a week prior. And just throughout all of my watching of horror movies, I was coming up with a list. I was like, I'm burnt out on looking. I want something on in the background that's a good movie that I love. It's a horror movie that I can just watch. And I threw on It Follows to just be astounded for like an hour and a half at how much I loved the soundtrack to it. I never thought about how important the sound design was in that movie until this was brought up. And I was like, oh my gosh, this movie would suck without this music. And to be quite frank, I think that music could go to a lot of other horror movies and work really well. And that's just kind of why I made this list.
Yeah, The Exorcist is one of the like classic horror movies, and I didn't want to throw a list together that was, because I could put a list together right now that's like horror movies with the most influential, like everyone on earth knows them scores. Like you could throw in Jaws, I guess, if you count that as a horror movie. That's a whole different discussion though. Psycho is one of the ones that I would put on that list. Halloween is the big one, and then I would put Alien on that list, but
it's really just pick your sci-fi horror. Mm-hmm. They're all kind of the same in that area, but Alien would, I'd say, be the biggest.
I might be a little biased, but The Exorcist is not one that like jumped out instantly, but that was like right behind the pack, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And looking past the like main theme that everybody's heard, some of the sound design on there is kind of terrifying even without the movie. I had it on driving home a couple days ago, and it's all these really weird, creepy string things, and it's like little plucks, and I'm convinced that they just like tossed a sprinkler up in the air and had it fall on a bunch of violins, because I don't know how else you would get some of these sounds.
I know at some points in the one we were listening to just on the way back was them tapping. They were just flat out smacking the violin with their fingers.
Mm-hmm. And I hadn't like listened to the entire thing isolated before, but after I did that, I was like, this is one of the coolest soundtracks of anything that I've heard. I bought it today. Or a version of it today. I think it's like half. But
yeah, I guess just for continuity's sake, Exorcist is a really funny one because Tubular Bells, the song that everyone thinks of from The Exorcist, that record actually sold a ton of copies. The song on its own is not all that weird. It's just kind of creepy in the context of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a kind of a weird point in music history because that's something that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's one side of a record. It's like 22 minutes long, and it's just kind of like that theme expanded upon.
I also think that movie was like the perfect storm of just crap going so wrong it went right. Because it's like, thinking about it, if that movie wasn't so big, I don't know that score would be considered so good. Because of just how random, like, because some of it is a masterpiece of being creepy. Some of it is just random, but only works at being creepy in the context of this really creepy movie where people were getting injured and dying on set, and like all this crap was around it. I think that's what takes it to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty well credited with like being a big part of the Satanic Panic, right? I mean, that's.
I remember it was a huge huge thing on set that like Linda Blair got injured quite a bit.
Yeah.
The house, I want to say, burned down. Like the set they were filming on, they burned down. That may not have been on the first one. That may have been on the second set.
I'm just talking about like culture in general. Like it was one of the things that like really cemented that almost like super religious push for a brief period. Just from it generally in history, like the period is called Satanic Panic of all of that stuff happening. And
that's the thing is, I don't think this was quite a push for it so much as a commentary on it.
Okay,
I believe it was in the middle of it, and then it kind of, they were trying to make a commentary on it, and then what ended up happening was everything on set happened, and they were like, "This is why you don't mess with the devil."
It just compounded everything. Essentially,
it heightened it.
It's really cool to know the history and context, especially when we're talking about a lot of these older movies, because that's what I was going to say with Psycho. You know, the whole reason I put Psycho on my list, the next of my Mount Rushmore, is that it probably isn't the first, as we were talking about earlier, but is definitely the one everybody notes as like the first experience most people had with music that was really scary. You know, the famous violins on the stabbing scene, and how, I don't know the exact story, but essentially the whole reason they did that is the motion you make playing it on the violin is almost like stabbing sideways, and that's why it makes the sound it does. Just kind of very ethereal things like that. And I think Psycho was 60? Is that
Psycho was 60, yeah.
I mean, that's, for the time, if you think about what was out musically, it's pretty ahead.
Yeah, I mean, even horror before that point wasn't horror. It was just vaguely scary stories. Because you think about, like, I love them, but the Universal Monster movies are realistically the start of, like, familiarized horror. But they're not scary in any way. I don't think they were scary back then to anybody. They were just scary stories that had a cool monster in it. So when you came to something with Psycho, it was essentially the start of slashers. That was the first one. I'm sure there's some probably random one prior that's not considered a slasher, but is. That's where we know it to be. And they really wanted to reinvent everything. That's why Alfred Hitchcock was just such a nutcase about it. I'm sure you guys have read about his other movies and how he is on those sets, but Psycho was like the worst of the worst.
Yeah, I literally will never look at birds the same.
So it's just the fact that has stood the test of time. I mean, we talked about it earlier. My argument against why it didn't make mine is because it's really the one song. But that one song is arguably the most iconic of horror.
Yeah, and so, you know, my other point was going to be I took film scoring in college, and that was the only real... We talked about Tubular Bells, but we didn't really talk that much about The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. And I talked about Tubular Bells in my recording class, very, very different. So that's why I happen to know that little tidbit. But there's basically a little, like, footnote in the film scoring, I guess, textbook I had, an online book that was like, oh, yeah, Psycho's here. That's important. Just very much Herman became, or I guess at that point was already an established composer and became even more established because of it. It's just how important that was at the time is hard to kind of understate. It was kind of the, you know, if what you were talking about was like baby's first steps, I think Psycho is the point where it becomes walking. So that those later movies can run.
Baby's first sprint. I really think Psycho was like just leaps and bounds from, I mean, we're going from all the Universal Monster movies, from what I can even remember music-wise, is just like that soft piano, that kind of stuff that we always talk about throwing in to like our short films when we're like, well, music shouldn't go here. We're like, yes, it should.
Right. It's the, you know, the stuff we generally refer to as creepy, the stuff that's banned from church, the, you know, things like tritones or just overall minor things, or just very crunchy chords, very dense layers, and it's usually something that's very ominous, so you'll get like wispy kind of synths and stuff. That was all done pretty early, actually. Yeah. They figured that out.
And so you had that, or like you can even go the Nosferatu approach where it's only scary music the whole time, which I actually really do like the original score for Nosferatu, and that was a consideration for this one. But then you go to Psycho, which spawned something that has never stopped, which is the jump scare. the violin slash was terrifying because it was 30 clicks louder than everything else. And the last thing you just heard was the most gut-wrenching sound design of a shower curtain being ripped across, excruciatingly loud too. So Psycho just was like, what if we scared the crap out of you? And then gave everyone else that idea, and they made it worse. So they kind of just, they went from walking to sprint, and they're like, yep, we're going to set the standard forever.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. It was kind of if the other movies you said I said like first steps, Psycho would have been walking, and then after that, it really became running pretty quickly with
I think
jump
it just
scares and that
became
stuff.
beating a dead horse after Psycho.
Yeah, I guess to be fair, there's a lot of the movies that I like kind of make fun of jump scares a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of the faux pas, the whole thing. I was thinking about it. Soundtracks in general, we tend to even still use very antiquated sound design. Think of early Alien movies. We always think of the theremin sounds and stuff as like representing space, and so when that stuff comes from like the 20s and 30s, like.
See, that's
like,
funny because I get the theremin for the Old West.
That's weird.
That is weird.
They used a bunch of theremin stuff on like spaghetti western stuff to do like background holler stuff. It's like it's not most of the sounds on a theremin. It's just whenever someone goes, "Yeah, I got a theremin," I'm like, "Cool, I can play Gold Ecstasy."
We might do that one day. We can bring the theremin out, but it's so interesting. I don't know. I love the history of the theremin too, so that's such an interesting, weird side point. But there's so many things that are so established in that stuff that goes so far back. It's interesting to just look at that as a whole. I thought take a note since we were talking a little bit about movie history.
All right, I think we can go on to our third president head here. I have The Omen.
I decided to pick one that was a little more recent so that they're not all like classic horror movies. I picked Hereditary.
Yeah, I picked The Exorcist, so we already talked about that one.
I did 2 and 2, too old, too new. But as far as The Omen goes, we haven't talked about too much of him. But the composer Jerry Goldsmith is the same composer that did Alien. Back when I was doing film classes in high school, I had to do a whole paper on the Alien soundtrack, so I am actually antiquated with that quite well. But this one, I think, fits the film a little better than Alien. And it was a conversation Connor and I had earlier where I said, if you take the music out of Alien, that movie is still terrifying. Mm-hmm. The music just helps, and it's really, really good. But with The Omen, I think the movie itself is not scary, really, and the music isn't scary. But when you put the fact of a killer kid and then sort of upbeat church music in a minor mode, it is just like the weirdest, confusing tornado of like creepy, just confusing, scary.
Yeah, The Omen was almost on my list also. So I had a really hard time picking between Hereditary and Midsommar. And ultimately, I went with Hereditary because I think Midsommar is so specific to that movie. And it fits it perfectly. But I think that Hereditary is just generally scary and could fit numerous other movies, minus maybe the last track. Mm-hmm. It's got some really good just sound design. It's a lot of strings, some synths, not really too many, but it is a lot of strings, which is pretty consistent throughout my whole list. And I think as far as modern horror movies go, it's one of the better scores out there.
Yeah, for sure. That's the problem with modern is I feel like the score is almost a forgotten art. Mm-hmm. And it's because there's not too many people that can do it, and especially for a budget that people want to pay. Yeah. Because it is expensive to get a composer in, and then to pay a full band to record it all. Like just going back to a bunch of the stuff in the 80s, like even, well, I don't want to say that one because I know it's on someone else's list. I've already ruined someone else's list before. But like even looking at The Exorcist, to just bring up Karl's from this one and yours from prior, there's a lot of strings on there. And I guarantee you those guys were probably not cheap back then and even not cheaper now. And you can get pretty close sounds with the computer. Now, I wouldn't go that route if I wanted strings. I would pay the string players, but I can see some soundtracks now and scores just kind of going the cheaper route.
You're going to go back on that in a couple of weeks.
Well, I was going to say,
Well,
actually,
that's a different scenario. We don't have the
I mean,
fundages.
there's better places to put budget sometimes. Not all of us have a studio budget,
Also, I did not think about this. Horror movies have a budget now.
That's true.
They didn't have that in the 80s, which is why you get a lot of the synth stuff, because they could pay one guy. But now I think Hereditary's budget was in the 50 million or somewhere in there. It was somewhere insane, I thought. But they have some money, so they can actually realistically pay some people.
I don't recognize the name for who did the rest of the soundtrack for Exorcist, but I mean, we talked about Bernard Herrmann with Psycho. I mean, that dude did a ton of stuff.
Is it cheaper?
Hereditary was $10 million.
Really? Huh.
Grossed 44.
Okay, that might have been what I was looking at. I was like, I knew it made money.
Sorry to cut you off.
It's fine. I don't even know what I was talking about. Just the important. I mean, we haven't really talked about it, but Exorcist is a bad example because other than just knowing Tubular Bells, we talked about Bernard Herrmann with Psycho and how much stuff he ended up doing. Later on, I think Taxi Driver is one of the greatest music scores ever written. That movie is amazing. He wrote a lot of great stuff. You talked about Jerry Goldsmith. Jerry Goldsmith did a ton of awesome movie scores, just all the way through. And a lot of these guys who were... There's not many of them left, is all I'm going to say. These people that... I guess they were the studio head at whatever studio or were bouncing around. I mean, these guys are basically rock stars as composers, and that era just kind of has left. And now we kind of have actual rock stars as composers, a lot of movies, or we end up with stuff that's mostly soundtrack based, or, you can thank the commercialization of stuff and soundtrack tie-ins. And
So I blame a lot of that on the 90s specifically, because that is where you see, one, the biggest drop-off, I think, in quality films is the 90s. There was a lot of pretty good films, but not a lot of great films out of the 90s. And
there's some awesome soundtracks from the 90s, though.
Oh, well, soundtracks.
No,
there's
some awesome scores, though, too. I mean,
a few, but I would say you significantly get the hitters 89, maybe up to 92. But most of the stuff after was very soundtrack-centric, and we also kind of hit a high surge in action movies in the 90s, which was kind of a big takeaway from that, because when you have the action movies, you want the cool chase musics, and then they want AC/DC or something on like that, so that the soundtrack argument just kind of went towards that.
I think you just remember the soundtrack better because they had, there's even back in the 80s, we had song tie-ins with movies, and that's kind of just a leftover of a lot of commercialization going on and trying to figure out how to tie deals together and, weird handshakes across industries kind of thing. But, a lot of times on a soundtrack, the popular songs on there will overshadow the actual score to a point where if you look at a modern soundtrack you buy, it might all be pop and there might not even be an original composition on it. Whereas if you go look at some of the older stuff we're talking about, if you were to buy that record, it's all original composition. It's all classical music, and it's classical music.
Now what you're seeing is, this is what I'm referencing, so I guess I did say it more wrong. You're seeing this split where you get both. You get a soundtrack and a score vinyl. I can go buy both for The Crow.
Oh, interesting.
And The Crow is from the 90s. That's the biggest obvious example of The Crow soundtrack would have made this list. Right, the Crow score would not make this list.
And we talked about that before this, too, because if I was to give you my favorite horror movie soundtracks, then none of them are this. It's all stuff with movie tie-ins. We talked about Maximum Overdrive and the hilariousness of AC/DC being brought in to give tracks for that movie. There's a lot of really funny ones.
Because, I always think of, Kenny Loggins was always the biggest one of, if you had him on your soundtrack in the 80s, you had a hit movie. But there would be 3 Kenny Loggins tracks, and the rest would be score. And that was it. And then in the 90s, you did the split of, it was we're going to do 10 tracks of the score, and then 10 tracks of the soundtrack. Dazed and Confused did that.
I think it's partially just people's, again, just lack of wanting to listen to what they see as boring classical music and not art in general. I think we talk about this literally every episode we make. Art in general has just dumbed down to a point that people don't want to have to think when they listen. They just want to be spoon-fed everything. That's probably the harshest I've ever said it, but yeah,
we think so much in our day-to-day lives, especially overthink so much in our day-to-day lives, that when we go to consume media, we want to take it at face value. And that is both a fine thought and an inherently bad thought to have.
Yeah, art is supposed to stimulate the senses, not pass through you like a breeze.
There is some art that I can look at and go, ah, yes, this is a pretty picture. And then there is some art that the longer I stare at it, the more I find out. And that should be all art, not some.
Correct.
And that is my TED Talk.
Art is like ogres. It should have layers.
Yup. All right.
It's another great soundtrack.
Ready to finish out this Mount Rushmore?
Close it out.
So for my last one, I have The Witch.
For my last one, I chose Suspiria.
You guys aren't going to like this one. It's Beetlejuice.
Yeah, that was the one I was going to mention earlier. I also blame Danny Elfman for a lot of things with score and soundtrack, and it is because Danny Elfman is a genius, and every time that man went to talk about it, he did like what John Mayer does. And he's like, I just went in there and started doing things, and it worked. And he's like...
So yeah, Michael Keaton is the star of Beetlejuice, but if there is like a co-star, it's the soundtrack, and then it's all the auxiliary characters. Harry Belafonte on the side, the score is what holds that movie up. It's not necessarily the soundtrack. And when I immediately thought about this, that's probably the newest movie I could think of that kind of did that for me. But again, I'm not as well versed in this as...
What? You mean you don't want to sit down and watch like a 2.5 hour slow burn movie just for the score?
Yeah, I saw the movie you're referencing and you're talking about right now, and I thought that movie was terrible. So
I watched that movie like yesterday, and I thought it was pretty good.
I think The Witch's soundtrack is perfect for the movie. Even like when we were listening to it in the car the other day, there was one song I was like, I don't even remember this. But the rest I was able to kind of follow along with the film in my head, and that's a movie I've seen at most 3 times. It's really good, pretty boring. But when I can picture the movie in my head that clearly, that says something, especially when I can easily say that movie is very boring.
Yeah, honestly, if we didn't have an already existing trend to do on Halloween, I would say we should do the Suspiria soundtrack on the live that week. I don't even think it's just good as like a score to a movie. It's a good album. So much synth work. It's almost like a synth rock album.
Well, yeah, it's Tom York. I've literally been listening to Radiohead all day. This is not a coincidence.
If you haven't done it so far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Drop us some music suggestions to check out for next year, and we'll see you next time.
Next year is crazy.